now call on George Adam to be followed by James Kennedy. James Kelly, forgive me.
James Kennedy. I was a bit concerned there for a minute, Presiding Officer. I thought I had something that somebody was going to follow me that I couldn't compete with. Presiding Officer, I'd like to thank Richard Lyle for bringing this debate here. I, like Jamie Hepburn, wasn't born at the time. I was born in 1969. I often hear stories from my mother and father about where they were during that period. You know, but why would someone of my generation be inspired by the legacy of John F. Kennedy? Well, his administration, yes, it was glamorous, yes, it was different, but it was younger. It was actually the first person president that was born in the 20th century to hold office in the White House at that time as well. And there's been much said about the Camelot legend that was mentioned as well, because they actually did believe they could change the world. With that youthfulness, there was this ideal of trying to change the world and make it a better place. But Tavish Scott is quite right. It's his words that are extremely important, and these are the things that inspire us. You know, like, things like there was a quote I saw earlier today that the problems of the world cannot possibly be solved by sceptics or cynics whose horizons are limited by the obvious realities. We need men, and nowadays we would say women, who can dream of things that never were. And these are things that, when you hear that as a young man, you know, or a young woman, it inspires you to actually, especially if you're a politician, to actually want to be involved in that process and to try and change the world. You know, some of the things that who wouldn't have been interested, my generation, who wouldn't want to get involved in all that, who want to see what it was. Was it the glamour? Yes, there was glamour involved in there as well. But I think the important part is exactly what Kennedy said, and many of the things that he actually done as well. You know, some of the things I define myself in my own politics is something that's mentioned here in another quote from him: economic growth without social progress lets the great majority of people remain in poverty, while privileged few reap the benefits of rising abundance. Now, these are relevant words here and now in debates that we have in this chamber now, and President Kennedy was saying that in the 1960s. You know, we in my own constituency office, we have we look to the Kennedy thing. David McCartney, my constituency manager, is actually he loves Bobby Kennedy. That's his hero. He sees Bobby as the one that he would aspire to be like. My wife Stacey, quite rightly, when one of our constituents came up to us after the election and said, "Oh, here's the First Lady of Paisley," it was Jackie Kennedy she was thinking about when someone said that. It wasn't any other First Lady that left office after that. And, you know, some of the things that he did during his time, in his short time, and, you know, we've mentioned the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the world was in the brink. You know, and I have a personal connection, or a constituency connection there as well, when Ken McGinley, a campaigning nuclear veteran, was in Christmas Island, and he actually was one of the soldiers who was experimented on by the British Army, and he wrote to Mrs Kennedy after this happened, because he was inspired, because it was John F. Kennedy who actually had the nuclear test ban that brought that in a year after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he actually wrote because of this, and he got a letter back and a picture back from Mrs Kennedy saying she thanked him for his support and everything else. And these are the things that make a difference in people's lives. Here's a man that's now in the kind of later years in his life, and he is still talking about that. That's still a major part of what he did, you know. But he was a man of change. He actually believed in changing things. You know, under Kennedy's power, you know, the federal government, women were actually paid the same amount of money as men. Now, that was radical in the 1960s. In some places, it's quite a radical ideal now in the private sector. But that was something that they pushed for there as well. And in the 1960s, another thing that we have here is that 0.0035% of the FBI, as a government body, were African American, and they were nearly all chauffeurs. The Kennedy administration went down the line of trying to make sure that this part of the population in America could get the opportunity to actually to aspire to be members of the FBI or do other to get involved in other things as well. So his death came as a great shock to everyone. The Andy Warhol exhibition that we had in here as well, you only had to look through that, Presiding Officer, to see how much an effect it had on someone like him as well. I would say that how you can sum up the legacy, and if you just give me this second here, Presiding Officer, is the fact that Oliver Stone's Nixon movie has a line in it where the character playing Nixon looks at a picture. It probably never happened, but he looks at a picture on the wall and he says, "You remind them of who they want to be." He says, "I remind them of what they really are." And that was the difference between whether he was good, bad or indifferent. The difference in the legacy of John Fitzgerald Kennedy is that he inspires us to be what we want to be, and we achieve everything that we can. And that, for me, is what makes a difference.
Thanks very much.